ارمي الصبر على قلبي يا الله، يا الله، يا الله، ارمي الصبر على قلبي، ارمي الصبر على قلبي، ارمي الصبر على قلبي، ارمي الصبر على قلبي يا الله. الصبر من عندك، الصبر من عندك يا الله، الصبر من عندك يا الله. اللهم اني استودعتك اخي يا رب، اللهم اجرني في مصيبتي واخلف لي خيرا منها يا الله.
Imagine this. A sound. Not a loud one at first, more like a whimper. It's lost beneath the grinding of bulldozers, the distant crump of explosions, the wails of sirens. But then, a rescuer, face caked in dust and exhaustion, pauses, listens. There it is again, a child's cry, buried, trapped. This isn't a scene from some disaster movie. This is the opening act of a daily tragedy, replayed with horrifying frequency. This tiny hand, reaching from the debris, isn't just a symbol, it's a real hand, attached to a real child, a child who, just hours ago, might have been laughing, playing. Now their world has been violently upended. Their home, their sanctuary, is a tomb of concrete and twisted metal. And as they lie there, terrified, hurt, and alone, the silence from the outside world can be just as crushing as the rubble that pins them down. This is where our story begins, not with statistics but with a heartbeat, a fragile, fading heartbeat. The silence isn't just a lack of noise, it's a lack of action, a lack of outrage. And the first step to changing it is to refuse to look away. Let's zoom in on Gaza. Because what's happening there as of May 2025 isn't just a crisis, it's a calculated descent into famine. Children, babies, they are literally dying from hunger. Not just from the bombs, though those are horrific enough. We're talking about a deliberate man-made starvation. Hospitals, the few that are still partially functioning, have run out of food. Think about that. The places you go to heal, to survive, are now places where you starve. Parents, in their absolute desperation, are crushing grass, to feed their infants. They're mixing salt with water, a cruel parody of milk, just to give their babies something to swallow. The United Nations is sounding the alarm with klaxons. As of yesterday, May 20th, 2025, they warned that 14,000 babies in Gaza could die from starvation. Not in a month, not in a week. Within the next 48 hours, 14,000 babies. Since March 2nd, 2025, Israel has effectively blocked all food, medicine, and life-saving aid from entering Gaza. For almost 3 months, a total aid blockade has been strangling the life out of 2 million people. This isn't collateral damage, this is a siege. The results are as predictable as they are horrifying. This is a death sentence delivered by bureaucracy and bullets. Beyond the creeping horror of starvation, there's the immediate, explosive terror of the airstrikes. The bombs continue to fall on Gaza, relentlessly, indiscriminately. Over 13,000 children, 13,000, have been killed by Israeli airstrikes since October 7, 2023. These aren't just numbers. Each one was a child with a name, a favorite game, a dream. A child who should be learning to read, not learning to identify the whistle of an incoming missile. A child who should be tucked into bed with a lullaby, not buried under the smoking ruins of their home. The scale of this slaughter is almost impossible to comprehend. The total Palestinian death toll is staggering. More than 53,573 Palestinians killed. Over 121,688 wounded. The world watches and Gaza weeps. Now let's shift our gaze, because this silent suffering isn't confined to one patch of land. For years, the skies over Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan have hummed with a different kind of menace. Drones, unseen, unaccountable, delivering death from above. In Iraq, after the invasion, American troops weren't just fighting insurgents. There were reports of homes destroyed, of women systematically raped in prisons like Abu Ghraib. This wasn't about liberation. For many, it was about a new kind of terror, a new kind of violation under a different flag. Then there's Afghanistan. Imagine a wedding, A celebration of life, of love, of new beginnings, laughter, music, families gathered, and then the sky rips open, a drone strike. The celebration turns into a massacre. Children, moments before dancing, are reduced to scattered limbs. This isn't a one-off horror story, it's a recurring nightmare. The precision of these weapons often prove to be a cruel joke, with civilian casualties dismissed as unfortunate errors. The trauma of living under a sky that could kill you at any moment is immeasurable. The war on terror became, for many on the ground, a reign of terror. The silence surrounding these collateral deaths was deafening. The ghostly tally of lost childhoods. Let's step back for a moment. Let the individual stories, the specific atrocities, coalesce into a larger, more horrifying picture. Because when you connect the dots, when you trace the lines of suffering across these war-torn landscapes, a number emerges. A number so vast it's almost abstract, yet it represents an ocean of individual tragedies. More than 1 million. 1 million Muslim children. Dead, lost, erased from this world. Not from natural disasters, not from incurable diseases, but from bombs, from drones, from starvation, from chemical weapons. Think about that. 1 million childhoods extinguished, 1 million futures stolen, 1 million empty chairs at dinner tables, 1 million lullabies unsung. This isn't a statistic to be glossed over in a news report. A tapestry of pain. The agony is not limited to the headlines from Gaza or the drone-scarred lands. Look at Yemen. For years, children there have been dying of hunger, a slow, torturous process. Markets, bustling with life one moment, have been turned into cemeteries by bombs. Bombs often supplied by Saudi jets, jets fueled and funded by powerful Western nations like the United States and the United Kingdom. It's a proxy war where the pawns are ordinary people, and the price is paid in emaciated bodies and mass graves. The hypocrisy is staggering. Humanitarian aid offered with one hand, while weapons that cause the devastation are sold with the other. Then there's Syria, a nation fractured by a brutal, protracted conflict. We've seen the images that sear themselves into your brain, chemical bombs, suffocating babies in their sleep, the sheer terror of parents discovering their children lifeless, victims of an invisible killer unleashed by their own government or by a complex web of warring factions. The world wrung its hands, drew red lines, and then watched as those lines were crossed again and again. The Syrian people, caught in the crossfire, have endured unimaginable horrors, with children bearing the brunt of the violence, displacement, and despair. The faces change, the accents differ, but the tears of a mother mourning her child are universal. The hollow ache in a starving child's stomach feels the same in Sana'a as it does in Gaza. And the indifference that allows this to continue is a global shame. Sanctions and systemic erasure. Beyond the bombs and bullets, there's another quieter weapon being deployed: economic sanctions. Nations like Iran and Pakistan find themselves strangled, not by a military blockade but by an economic one. The official line is often about curbing nuclear ambitions or combating terrorism, but the reality on the ground is that these sanctions disproportionately punish ordinary citizens. They decimate economies, lead to shortages of essential goods, medicine, food, spare parts, and make daily life a relentless struggle for survival. All supposedly because these nations are standing up for themselves against a global order they find unjust. The impact on children is, as always, devastating. Malnutrition rates rise, access to healthcare diminishes, educational opportunities shrink. The sanctions become a collective punishment, turning entire populations into hostages in a high-stakes political game. The architects of these policies sit in comfortable offices thousands of miles away, debating clauses and exemptions, while families on the ground are forced to make impossible choices: food or medicine, education or survival. This slow, grinding pressure is designed to break the will of nations, but it often breaks the bodies and spirits of their most vulnerable citizens first. Then, shift your focus to India, where a different kind of oppression is at play. Millions of Muslims find themselves increasingly marginalized, their loyalty constantly questioned, their very identity under attack by a rising tide of religious nationalism. They are forced to prove their allegiance to a state that seems determined to render them second-class citizens. The stories are chilling lynchings for something as simple as eating beef, a sacred cow for some but a staple food for others. The silence from many global powers on these internal erosions of democratic values and human rights is telling. The opulence of indifference. Now let's talk about a particularly painful dimension of this global indifference, the perceived complicity or at least the deafening silence from within the Muslim world itself, particularly from the rich, oil-flush Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, nations blessed with immense wealth, nations that are custodians of Islam's holiest sites. Yet while their brothers and sisters suffer in Gaza, Yemen, Syria, and beyond, what do we often see? An emulation of Western lifestyles, a pursuit of extravagant vanity projects, glittering skyscrapers that pierce the sky while children starve just a few hundred miles away. Leaders in these nations are often seen bowing, metaphorically and sometimes literally, to Western powers. Think of the red carpet receptions for figures like Donald Trump in the UAE, even as his policies were wreaking havoc across the Muslim world. It's a spectacle of cognitive dissonance. The rhetoric might speak of Islamic solidarity, but the actions often scream of self-preservation and alignment with global power structures that are, in many instances, directly or indirectly contributing to the suffering. This isn't just an observation, it's a source of deep anguish and frustration for many Muslims globally. Where is the Marshall Plan for Palestine, funded by Arab wealth? Where is the united, unwavering political bloc that uses its economic leverage, its oil, its investments, to demand justice and an end to the bloodshed? Instead, we see normalization deals, quiet diplomacy that yields little for the oppressed, and a focus on internal stability and economic diversification that seems to conveniently sidestep the raging fires in their own backyard. The wealth is there, the potential power is there, but the collective will, the courage to truly challenge the status quo, often appears to be missing. This isn't to say there's no aid, no charity. There is. But it's often a fraction of what's needed, and it doesn't address the root political causes of the suffering. The time to roar is now, so here we are. At the end of this litany of horrors, Gaza starving, children bombed, drones humming, 1 million young lives lost, sanctions choking, oppression spreading, and a world largely looking away, or worse, looking on with a detached clinical interest. What now? Do we just sigh, shake our heads, and turn the page? Do we let the sheer scale of it all numb us into inaction? That, my friends, is exactly what the architects of this suffering and the enablers of indifference are counting on. They want you to feel helpless. They want you to believe your voice doesn't matter. But silence is betrayal. Silence in the face of such monumental injustice is complicity. Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah, the doctor in Gaza watching children like Sawar Ashur waste away, put it simply, we're not asking for miracles, we're asking for food. He's asking for our shared humanity to kick in. He's reminding us that these are not abstract victims, they are people, just like us, with the same right to life, to dignity, to hope. And if we, the global community, the Muslim Ummah, everyone with a shred of conscience cannot answer that basic plea, then what does that say about us? The time for quiet despair is over. It's time to roar. It's time to act.